Welcome back to the ECB Cyberbar. Today's episode is a little bit different. We've been bombarding you with the latest cybersecurity attacks, AI model mishaps, a little bit of advice, and maybe a lot of fear-mongering. But today's episode is different. We want to unpack the evolution of cybersecurity gadgets, from the ancient dial phones, which I don't know about, but maybe Q does, to the modern day technology that we use today. Today I'm joined by Q, as mentioned. Would you like to say a few words before
Certainly.
we start?
Well, thank you and welcome to ECB Cyberbar. Please subscribe and like and comment. That really does help the channel so that we can reach as many people as possible with what we have to share. Thanks, Gamu, for that intro about the dial phone being an ancient technology. I distinctly remember growing up around one, so you know how young that makes me feel.
Yeah.
But anyway, the reason that we've taken this direction is because all transmission of information or data is really about human connection. And so we're trying to explore the connection between humans and why there was always a need for security at every single stage, from the ancient ways, dial phones and so on, to the most modern. So let's take it away.
Okay. So obviously before the dial phones, there was a previous mode of communication and
Yeah.
security. Could you dive deep on that?
Okay. Well, the most ancient and most prominent, method of communication has been the written word. So letters and scrolls, and of course, perhaps predating that would be cuneiform and hieroglyphics and so on. But the one we can identify with the most, which still is there today in some regard,
Yeah.
is the written letter. And back then, what you would have is you had a stagecoach that, while it was transporting passengers, would also be transporting the mail. And, as always, there were the criminal elements out there that would try and get into that and try and intercept the mail. And so one of the ways that you protected your mail was through what are called seals. A wax seal is this hard wax that they would melt onto the flap of the envelope where you have your letter, and then someone would stamp their uniquely designed seal on that. And so if anyone tried to read the letter, they'd have to first break
The seal.
that seal. And once you broke the seal, you knew this letter's not secure. Somebody's been there already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very similar to today. We have man-in-the-middle attacks where now people are intercepting the digital version of the letter. And the whole point of the HTTPS and the SSL certificates and the padlocks and all of that is to be your wax seal, to ensure that you can identify that someone tampered with your digital letter. So
Yeah.
that's a great comparison.
Yeah. That's a really, really good way to put that. Well done. Yeah, so that would be your man in the middle attack, because the highwayman was literally the man in the middle of the journey of your communication. So they'd intercept it, and if you saw it, you knew that, okay, it's been tampered with. And then from there, I guess we move on to what brought us, in my opinion, to the modern era of communication, and that would be the telegraph.
Okay.
So the telegraph was, it was communication where electrical signals were sent through a metal wire.
Okay.
And those signals, were based on a predetermined code between the person who's sending the message and the person
receiver.
receiving it.
Yeah.
That's it. So Morse code, for example, was a type of telegraph. And if you remember, Moss, the man that is named after, sent the first message in 1844. Well, you wouldn't
Remember.
I promise, I wasn't there in 1844, but So the first message went out, "What has God wrought?" Which, in other words, what has God done? It was, this is a leap into the new era, and he had a little message to send. That was back in 1844, and he did it through a series of dots and dashes and the gaps in between. That's what Morse code is, but that's the kind of communication you call telegraph.
That sounds very complicated. I can't imagine living in that era of dashes and dots, and it sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess the vulnerability there was that anyone who touched the wire, like what you said, could read the dots and the dashes.
Right.
And if we compare to today, this is why we encrypt data in transit, because as data is moving from point A to point B, someone can, intercept that. But if it's encrypted, even if they unscramble the data, it won't make sense, because only the receiver and the sender have like the plain version of the message.
True. That's very true. I mean, look, even in that era, you kind of had ways in which they would try and scramble the data, so they wouldn't just send the Morse code out. So, for example, in World War II, there's a story of the Enigma machine. It was an encryption of some sort. Take the message and run it through this machine, and then the message is scrambled. And unless you have another Enigma machine with the same key or the same code to decode that information, then you couldn't do anything about that. And I guess that tells you how far communications come. Now these things happen automatically, and we just expect it to be there. My comms better be encrypted. And then after that comes, I guess, what you called my era, which is
the dial phone.
The dial phone. Look, the dial phone, the best security you had on the dial phone was when you would actually... So maybe let me describe a dial phone, but we're going to put a picture of it on screen so that you have, an image of what that looks like. And you had all the numbers, 1 to 9 and then 0 on a dial, and you rotated that dial to a clip that would stop the rotation, and that then would count the number itself by the degree of your rotation. And I remember... Sash, please forgive me, but I remember my sister actually, being able to use the phone even if it was locked, even if you locked the dial so the dial couldn't move. The security measure was you had a little lock that you could place on the first dial, and so you couldn't dial past the first number. But there was a way you could actually just tap dial, and because it counted the clicks. Each number was represented by a click in the machine, and so it counted the number of clicks that were generated. So if you did it right, if your number, for example, was 002, and 0 was counted by 10 clicks, so you do 10 clicks in a row, pause, another 10 clicks in a row, then for the 2, just 2 clicks, it would count it as a dial. So there was still a way around it.
Okay, definitely. And I think in alignment with the dial phone, the other form of security was something called analog encryption, whereby, which is also known as voice scrambling, whereby you could hide a message by physically twisting or flipping sound waves like themselves before sending them, rather than changing the data into ones and zeros, binary numbers. So basically, the normal sound, which is your voice, would make a wave with high pitches and low pitches, and then the analog scrambler would flip the pitches upside down and like kind of swap them, I guess. And then the result is that if an outsider listens in, they won't be able to understand the sound because it sounds garbled, it sounds messed up. But the person on the other end with the matching device will be able to unscramble. So that's really interesting. And I guess the modern landing point would be that attackers don't need to be anywhere near you. A phone tap would need a person like on site, like physically tapping the phone. But today, anyone from anywhere in the world, whether they're in, Belgium and I'm in Zimbabwe, can easily attack me, even though we're miles and miles apart. So... I guess that physical access is no more a factor.
That's it. Because if you look at all the communications we're talking about, you had to be near the line where the communication is going through. If it's a letter, you had to stop the stagecoach. And usually the highwaymen had the pistols to do that, the muskets or whatever to do that. If it was a telegraph, you had to get to the line. And if the line's protected all the way through, you couldn't do that. If it was, your telephone, you had to be near the device again, or a junction box or the line. So physical threat was was the real threat of those devices.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I guess in the 80s, well, I was going to say we, but I wasn't born. The 80s then moved
Are you
on
allowed to
to
say your age, Gamu? Can we find out when you were born? We need to fact check this,
no,
okay?
no. I guess in the 80s we moved on to something called war dialing. Could you expand a little bit on that?
Okay, yeah. So war dialing is this young guy wrote code that could dial so many numbers, and what would happen is it would dial multiple phone numbers in sequence until it came across a number that didn't have somebody actually physically picking up. It heard a tone. Now, for those of us who are old enough, you'll know that we'd now moved into the internet era and into the modern era, the beginnings of the modern era, where there was the internet and you had a modem that would be the interface between your surface device or your terminal, your computer, and the internet itself.
Okay.
So the modem was the interface, and the modem made a certain sound when you dialed into the internet. You actually had to dial into the internet, and so once the program picked up, oh, that this is a modem because there's been that sound. That meant that person was automatically connected to a terminal or to the web on your account.
Okay.
So that was the beginnings of the modern era of hacking. Yeah.
Okay. And
sorry, just a quick one. It's named war dialing after the movie War Games.
Okay.
There was a movie in 1983 where there's a kid who almost brings about World War III because they intercept comms, for the military comms using that method. And so it was called war dialing after that.
Okay, and looking at today, war dialing is very similar to port scanning, whereby you scan for open ports on a network, a bunch of different ports. There's so many ports. I don't even want to know how many there are, but basically port scanning is looking for open ports so that you get access into that specific port, and then that's how you gain unauthorized access to a user's data, etc. And today that's happening automatically. Bots, AI agents scanning the internet constantly, looking for exposed devices, and it's the same attack method, just more efficient, more advanced, more speed, etc.
Right.
So I'm seeing a trend that the attacks or the attack mechanisms are staying the same, but just on a larger scale and more efficient. Yeah.
That's it. That's it.
Okay, and then viruses and worms, which I definitely know about.
Okay,
yeah. So after the war dialing, we moved on to viruses, and at some point, I guess in the 90s and 2000s, antivirus became such a huge thing. It became like a must. Like you need to have an antivirus because viruses and worms were going rampant on that. Do you have any anecdotes on that?
Yeah, actually. The beginning of what we face today was actually an accidental thing where you had a software replicate itself. The way a virus replicates itself in the human body.
Yeah.
A virus enters a cell, attacks the nucleus, sees the DNA, the RNA.
It needs a host.
It needs a host, and then it takes the genetic information and it creates another version of itself from, components of the cell and replicates itself. So in the same way, there was a graduate student back in 1988 who, I was alive by then, he wrote a code to try and measure the size of the internet.
I think that's really cool, but yeah, go on.
It sounds really cool, and I imagine, I mean, if you think about it, it means the internet must have been not that big if you could try and measure it. I'm wondering if someone could actually try and measure the internet today at the rate of expansion that it goes.
Yeah.
And he wrote this code, but a bug in the code made it replicate too aggressively.
Yeah.
And so this thing just started to multiply, and it filled out and took over a big chunk of the internet.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know how many petabytes of code you would need today to take over a chunk of the internet, but it took a lot of the internet at that time. And so, everybody just said, okay, this thing is like a virus. It's replicating like a virus. And you have more examples. That one was called the Morris virus. I think it must have been named. I don't know if it was named after the student, but listen, let us know in the comments if you know exactly how. And don't Google it. Just let us know if you know.
Okay.
So the virus was born, and since then we've had malicious code that self-replicates and infects entire systems and does what it wants. And when I think of that, I think of The Matrix. I don't know if you remember, if you ever watched the Matrix movies.
I have.
You remember Agent Smith in the sequels?
Yeah.
He became a self-replicating virus, pretty much.
You. Yes, me. Me too.
Which was an irony, because in part one of The Matrix, he was calling human beings the virus. But he became this self-replicating code that filled up the entire Matrix. And so it's kind of similar to that.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting. And speaking of viruses, also looking at social engineering, starting in the 2000s, there was a phishing email with the subject line, "I love you," and an attachment. And obviously, if you receive that kind of mail in your inbox, you're going to be curious. You're going to open and say, who loves me? Who said that they love me?
I want to bet that there was a bias towards younger people to open that email, but you never know. You never know. You just never know.
Yeah, so basically, I guess a virus was embedded in that email, and obviously people were very curious to open it. And it spread worldwide within hours, caused billions in damage. And the exploit didn't just target your device, it targeted your psyche, targeted your emotions. You felt moved by it, and that's how social engineering is working today. Hackers are manipulating victims through psychological methods, and of course everybody wants love. Everybody wants to be loved, so I'm gonna open the email even if I know that there's the chance of me knowing someone to send this is very low. I'm still gonna open the email. So that's kind of like the ancestor of phishing that we have today. So the attack vector was never really just code. It was also human curiosity and emotion. And moving on from there, we moved into the BlackBerry era. Now, BlackBerry phones took over the world at some point in the 2000s. They were very popular. There was a lot of hype around the BlackBerry phone. Basically, it's because it was unhackable, I guess.
Right.
It was
for its time.
Yeah, it was kind of unhackable, and maybe you could just shed light on that, because I never used. Well, I know what a BlackBerry looks like. I didn't own one, but at that age, I didn't really care much about the technology, so maybe you'd know more.
Today's episode is full of ageism, because I said I think younger people open the email, and Gamu is coming back with the BlackBerry. Look, it was BlackBerry brought about an interesting concept to telephony, where your usual telephone line would just connect to the network and direct to the person you're speaking to. Now your communication went to the BlackBerry server first. And before it even went there, it was encrypted on your device. So you had hard-coded keys on each device. So now your device has its hard-coded key, sends a packet of information to the server. The BlackBerry server recognizes your device, and this data is encrypted and can only be decrypted by the key of your BlackBerry that you're going to communicate with, the other device that you're communicating with. And so from there, all of a sudden you had this new communication. And I remember first reading about encrypted comms and wondering, hey, what's that all about? I thought, my communication was kind of safe when it's out there in the ether. But I guess it wasn't.
Okay. And also, just to add on to that, companies who had employees that used BlackBerry phones could instantly lock or wipe out the phone from miles away. So
if it gets stolen or something,
yeah,
or if it's compromised in any other way.
exactly. So it sounded pretty secure.
Yeah.
And I think people today wonder whatever happened to BlackBerry. Why did it,
I mean,
collapse?
it was the phone of choice for the American president. I
It
remember
was.
Barack Obama.
It
had a
was.
BlackBerry.
It really was a big deal. And basically what happened was that BlackBerry kind of didn't see the vision. What was coming next was touchscreens, and BlackBerry felt, or rather misinterpreted consumer behavior. They thought that people would stick to physical keypads or keyboards and wouldn't want to like move on to that next technology. So just to give you figures, at its peak in 2009 to 2010, BlackBerry controlled nearly 20% of the global smartphone market and over 50% of the US market. Like you said, the president himself was using it. But by 2014, its hardware market share just dropped by 99%. 99%, because they simply failed to adapt to that touchscreen revolution. That's when Apple started taking over and Android and the game changed.
But just imagine losing dropping down to 100th of your market share in 4 years. And that's got to be some kind of, I don't think even Nokia fell off that hard.
Like that, No, this was hard. And in as much as it was a very secure enterprise, secure idea and all of that concept, it got too comfortable in the comfort zone. When Apple launched in 2007, when they launched the iPhone, that consumer behavior began to change. iPhone was now like the new in thing, iPhone and Android. And they feared that large touchscreens would drain battery life, overload networks. But by the time they realized that, okay, this is actually the next big thing, it was too late. It was too late.
Interesting. And I guess that brings us to the modern era, because we're now in the touch phone era. This is the devices that we're using. I see right there you're tapping on a screen and you're doing your thing. I got my thing here with the timer, and we've come into an era where you think then we must have these forts and there must not be any hacks and whatever. But from the look of things, we're still as vulnerable.
Yeah, we are, definitely.
I wonder how that works though.
Well, I would say it's because most devices are becoming interconnected. If you look at, for example, okay, I'm guilty because I'm an Apple user, but if you look at Apple, okay, you have your MacBook. Let's say you have an iPad, you have an iPhone, you've got the Apple Watch, you've got the AirPods. Like everything is interconnected under one account, under, Q's account or my account. And because of that interconnection, as long as a hacker is able to penetrate into one of your devices, it becomes easier because you're more exposed. The attack surface has increased. So it becomes easier to laterally move across all your devices. Not only that, but also looking at smart devices. Internet of Things is becoming increasingly popular, increasingly advanced. You can have your smart home, which is connected to your fridge. You're connected to your lights. Like everything is just connected.
And I can't imagine someone who's creating the smart light bulb is thinking, oh, I should put some encryption on the bulb, and having all those costs. They don't care. They just want to sell as many bulbs as they can.
Yeah, that's true. No one is really doing their due diligence when it comes to even cameras, like CCTV cameras. Most of the time, they're not secure. So IoT security, I think, is also an emerging area in cybersecurity, something that in the next few years or the next year is going to be booming.
Okay, if there are any entrepreneurs out there, there's an opportunity. Especially if you can make some backward compatible security measures for IoT devices, there's an opportunity.
And not only that, in the modern day, a lot of enterprises are migrating from hardware to cloud for their storage, for their systems. And again, cloud is on the internet. So as long as your data is on the internet, it's at more risk. So there's that risk of exposure. And that's how we stay vulnerable, because yes, we have encryption now, yes, we have AI security now and all these new methods, but at the same time the internet is not 100% secure. So as long as you're on the internet, it's easy for attackers to, penetrate. Yeah.
So I guess, our the biggest takeaway from this is that while the technology has evolved, as we said in the beginning, to from handwritten letters to what it is now,
Yeah.
the human connection is still the same. Unfortunately, that means that also the criminal element is still the same. It's still going to try and come in the middle and take away something to exploit.
Yeah. And also, we're still human at the end of the day. So we are still the weakest link. So yes, we have better devices, better security, but at the same time, people are still falling
for phishing attacks.
Yeah, people are still falling for the stupidest, attacks. Sometimes like someone will ask me like, "Oh, is this real? Is this fake?" I'm like, "Can't you tell? Like, clearly this is
How
not."
old are they?
Yeah, how old are they? That's a great question. But you can never be. One thing about cybersecurity is that you can never be 100% safe. Like that's something that we were taught, that you don't think that you're 100% safe. So my takeaway from this is just for us to remain vigilant. If you have your Apple ecosystem, don't think you're, protected 100%. Just staying wary of these phishing emails, these social engineering methods, but also just to be more open-minded in terms of what areas aren't really being looked at in cybersecurity coverage. For example, you mentioned Internet of Things, devices, smart devices. How can we make them more secure? Like, if you're an innovator, entrepreneur, cybersecurity enthusiast, this is just something to think about. So that's my takeaway personally. I don't know if you have any last words before we wrap up.
Well, I just want to repeat, please write something in the comments. Let us know what you think.
Yeah.
Like the video, subscribe, share it with friends. Doesn't cost you anything, but it helps the channel to grow and for us to be able to reach more people and raise that cyber awareness.
100%. Thank you so much for watching, and we will catch you on the next episode. Bye.
Bye-bye.